On today's show, UConn's Stephon Castle being a little picky about which team might ultimately select him in this year's NBA draft, how that impacts the Houston Rockets, plus Houston to re-engage the Brooklyn Nets ahead of the NBA draft. We'll unpack what that means, as well as the Rockets who made the top 25 under 25 list, and so much more on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Where the best way you can help our show out is to comment anything below on the YouTube video. Even if you just go there and type Go Rockets, that helps us out a ton. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for being an everydayer. Also, my apologies. We missed a couple days here. Started this week, had some personal stuff going on. All taken care of now, but we are back on track, and we've got a bit of a smorgasbord of topics to tackle on today's show that we're going to get into. We're going to talk about Stephon Castle here in just a moment, some of the reporting around his draft stock and kind of him maybe angling to go to a couple certain teams in the lottery. We're also going to get into some of the reporting about the Rockets and their desire to re-engage the Nets ahead of the NBA draft, and kind of what that could look like, what that ultimately means for those two teams, any trade permutations, rumors, and stuff going on there, as well as the Rockets who made the top 25 under 25 list crafted by The Ringer. So let's start with UConn's Stephon Castle. There is some reporting by ESPN's Jonathan Givony that is as follows. Castle appears to be avoiding private workouts with teams that already have starting point guards in place, a strategy that might not be as effective as in the past, since every team in the top 15 has his medicals because of rule changes implemented this year. So, really quick, to preface some backstory here, right? So previously, prospects were not required to submit their medicals to all the teams in the lottery. This was like a big sticking point where you'd maybe have a prospect who didn't want to go to a couple certain teams, that were in the pecking order at the top of the lottery or whatever. And so they would kind of try to strong arm those teams by saying, oh, we're not working out for you. We're not giving you medical records, like all this stuff. Because that's one of the things that happens in private workouts, right? You do physicals. You also see, on-court drills, open gym environment, that kind of stuff. You also get a chance to really connect with these prospects on a human level, right? Interviewing them, asking them questions, vetting them, trying to see if they'd be a good fit for your team, your organization, your roster, all that. So it's kind of an older style draft tactic that Castle is seemingly trying to implement this year, where he doesn't want to go to a team with a starting point guard. So effectively, that would theoretically rule out the Rockets because they have Fred VanVleet. And not only do they have Fred VanVleet, they have Jalen Green, who is not a quote unquote point guard, but handled the basketball quite a bit and largely was one of the Rockets' primary ball handlers and primary initiators last year. They also have Amin Thompson, who they drafted to be a point guard. Now, whether Amin Thompson will ultimately become a point guard is still kind of up in the air, TBD, especially after we saw how effective he could be in more of a wing-centric role in his rookie season. So first off, I understand why Castle is doing this, because you don't want, if you're a prospect, if you're getting ready to have your dreams come true, you're going to the NBA, you don't want to be drafted and then immediately buried on the bench or, stuck behind, a veteran guy, or not able to showcase your talents or skills right away, especially if you feel like you can be a day one contributor. And the way that Castle has been so vocal about, I'm a point guard, talking at the combine and stuff, gassing himself up. Obviously, his confidence is on 10, right? He wants a starting spot. He wants to be in a position where he can step in day one and make an impact for a team. Unfortunately, I am not describing the Houston Rockets right now, because even if the Rockets selected Stephon Castle number 3 overall and drafted him and brought him in, he's not going to be part of the rotation day one. Whoever the Rockets take, if they take somebody with this third overall pick, they are going to slow play the development of this prospect. So you look at some of the top teams, right? Atlanta with Trae Young, DeJounte Murray. The Wizards don't really have a team a player that fits the bill as a, quote unquote, de facto starting point guard. The Spurs are another team that don't have a long-term solution at the starting point guard spot. And then maybe the Utah Jazz is another one, with some question marks about their long-term starting point guard availability and whatnot. So it's very possible that Castle is kind of maybe angling himself to get drafted by the San Antonio Spurs, right? Because who wouldn't want to potentially team up with Victor Wembanyama and, be part of a soon to be, unfortunately, probably wrecking ball in the Western Conference for years and years to come. That would make a lot of sense, right? And Castle playing next to Wemby and playing under Popovich would probably be like one of my worst nightmares. That would be awful. But I would hope that this reporting, this approach wouldn't dissuade the Rockets from taking him with the third overall pick, as long as they think that he is the right fit or the right prospect or the best player available, what have you, to take third overall. Because again, the Rockets got a really good look at all these prospects at the combine. Now, there is something to be said for, again, if you don't get these private workouts, you don't get a chance to see these players up close. You don't get a chance to get secondary and tertiary interviews with them and kind of really gauging if they'd be a good fit for your team, for your organization. So that is a little bit problematic. But ultimately, I understand that Castle is doing this because he probably wants to be able to, step into a role right away, right out of the gate. What does this mean for the Rockets, right? Like, would this take Castle off of the Rockets board? Should it, eliminate Castle as a prospect that the Rockets would even be remotely considering with the third overall pick? Again, I'm in the camp that I don't think it would. There's enough tape on this guy, and there's enough kind of pre-draft film to look at to be able to gauge and evaluate and make a decision, rather than just, whether a 2 or 3 hour in-person personal workout would be the difference maker for a prospect. It shouldn't swing. It shouldn't swing an organization's opinion one way or the other. But it's at least worth noting here, which is why I wanted to bring it up on the show, because Castle is a guy that the Rockets should be and could be looking at with that third overall pick. So, coming up, I want to get into the reporting about the Rockets' interest in re-engaging the Brooklyn Nets ahead of the NBA draft, as well as their desire to kind of go hunting for a star player and what that could ultimately look like. We're going to get into that here in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Look, I don't know about you, my least favorite thing when I'm buying tickets could be to go to a game, could be to go to a concert, whatever, is you're going through the process, you're trying to buy your tickets, and you go through, you get to the end, and then suddenly they throw out like digital handling fees and service charges and all this stuff. And suddenly you're paying more in fees than you are for the actual tickets. It is the most frustrating thing ever. That doesn't happen with Game Time. They have their all-in price up front, so you know exactly how much you're paying throughout the whole process. Take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets. All right, let's get into some of the trade rumor mill stuff, the slop, if you will, because it's that time of year where the rumor mill is churning and there's a lot of stuff to discuss. So Michael Scotto of USA Today recently reported that the Rockets are considering or discussing, being active in trade talks with the number 3 overall pick, one of 5 potential first-round picks that the Rockets can trade this offseason in a package to land a star player, that they're going to be active in trade talks all the way up to and including the NBA draft night. On top of that, there has been reporting that has suggested that the Rockets have re-engaged and will attempt to, or have in the past, engaged the Nets in discussions about swapping their own draft capital, the Nets picks that the Rockets own, with the Nets for the Suns picks that Brooklyn currently owns by way of the Kevin Durant trade. Jonathan Fagan of the Houston Chronicle was the first to report on that. And apparently the Rockets are also now willing to re-engage the Nets in those trade discussions up to and including the NBA draft. So what does this all mean for the Rockets? First off, if it wasn't already painfully obvious at the NBA trade deadline, it should be even more painfully obvious now as we are approaching the NBA draft that for the Brooklyn Nets, a team that is in what feels like a lot of disarray, right? No clear direction. Their best player is currently Mikal Bridges. They just lost their pick this year to the Houston Rockets, and it's currently sitting at number 3 overall. Granted, it's a weaker draft, but it has been screaming to me like at the top of its lungs. It makes so much sense for the Rockets to try and renegotiate a trade or to try and engage in trade talks with the Nets to get them their draft picks back. We've talked about this a lot here on this show. And the reason we talk about it a lot is it makes a lot of sense. The problem is, and this is my understanding of the situation, the people that I've spoken to within the Rockets organization, it seems like the Nets and their brain trust doesn't enjoy the idea or isn't really, amenable to the idea of bottoming out. That's not what Joe Tsai wants to do. That's not what Sean Marks wants to do. And even though it's the smart thing to do, like we look at the Rockets, right? They were top of the world, Western Conference, NBA championship contenders year in, year out with James Harden. Then James Harden wants out. Everything comes crumbling down in Houston. And guess what? Ownership embraced being a bad team for a handful of years, and now we're starting to see the fruits of that labor pay off. The Rockets were the NBA laughingstock for 3 seasons in a row, and boom, they get to season number 4, start a phase 2 in the rebuild, and they bust out a 41-41 season. And there's a lot of optimism and a lot of hope on the horizon that the Rockets are headed in the right direction. There is a clear-cut identity for this team. There is a vision for the future of this team, and they have a lot of assets and a lot of young talent to be able to swing for trades and to make splashy deals and to really be a player in the NBA landscape again, right? There, hopefully this is a team that we're talking about, making a playoff run next year. The Nets don't have any of that right now, and they don't own their future draft capital, so they are not currently incentivized to tank or to bottom out. The only silver lining for the Nets is that they do own the future draft capital of the Phoenix Suns. But as it currently stands, the Suns are also not incentivized to be bad right now, right out of the gate. Now, maybe things blow up in Phoenix over the next season or two with KD and Booker and Beal, and suddenly Phoenix turns into a dumpster fire, and then the Nets are like, ooh, we got all these juicy picks from the Suns. But it's like this rabbit hole or where you keep going down. And guess what? Even if things do blow up in Phoenix, the Suns, because they won't have their own picks, are no longer incentivized to be bad. So what are the Suns going to do? What is Matt Ishbia going to do in Phoenix? They're going to be probably a middling team, scrapping and clawing and trying to win as many games as possible, even if it means they're playing barely 500 basketball. Then, those picks aren't going to be cream of the crop, top end lottery picks. You're going to have to get some luck from the basketball gods, like the Rockets did this year, admittedly, where the pick jumps up from 9 to 3. So what does this ultimately mean for the Rockets? One, I think that if the Rockets are to re-engage the Nets in trade talks, I think it could happen in one of 2 ways. One, the obvious one is re-engage the Nets and try to get them to bite on a trade for Mikal Bridges, because he addresses, first off, he fits the mold as an Ime Udoka type player to a T. And he also addresses the Rockets' distinct or clear lack of shooting, right? Mikal Bridges can shoot the lights out of the ball. He's a great, versatile wing defender, all NBA caliber defender, right? And he's been kind of thrust into a role with Brooklyn that doesn't work for him because he's not a number one option. He's a hell of a third option or even a fourth option, depending on, the hierarchy of offensive talent ahead of him. But he's not a guy that you want to rely on consistently to be your number one or number two guy. That's just not his forte. He's much better served being a reliable upper echelon 3-and-D wing type player. So if you're the Rockets, you try to re-engage the Nets around the idea of getting Mikal Bridges. And that could simply be, the number 3 overall pick this year, plus any number of the rest of the picks that the Rockets own via the Nets. And then, I don't know, salary filler, I guess, at that point, because the unique thing here is the Rockets could theoretically just draft a player with the intent to trade said player to the Nets down the line. And if they do, the third overall pick is clocking in somewhere around $10 million a year, something like that, starting value contract. I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I'm going off rip here, but the players at the top of the draft, right, they make more money on their rookie scale deals. So that player could be aggregated in a trade down the line to get a Mikal Bridges type. So if the Rockets get on the phone with Sean Marks and they're like, hey, all right, which player do you want at the top of the draft? We'll draft him, then we'll trade him to you. And we'll trade him to you once he's on his rookie scale deal. That way we can actually factor that money into the trade for Mikal Bridges so as to not have to include too much, dead salary or the pieces that the Rockets have, which they still have Jock Landale, they have Jae'Sean Tate, they have Jeff Green, they have Steven Adams. They have a lot of expiring contracts, a lot of quote unquote salary filler to be able to throw in a trade for Mikal Bridges. But you also wouldn't want, there's a couple of those names, right? You wouldn't want to give up Steven Adams or Jeff Green. Those guys, at least right now, project to have important roles on this team next season. Now, Jock Landale and Jae'Sean Tate, a little bit easier to stomach if you have to lose one, if not both of those guys to get up to the salary floor in order to absorb Mikal Bridges back if you're the Rockets. Now, the problem here is, are the Nets going to continue to be stubborn? Because if you're telling me that Sean Marks, for the cost of Mikal Bridges, could get back the Nets picks that he gave up in the James Harden trade, it would allow the Nets to be able to control their own destiny, to bottom out, to be bad for a couple seasons, and to recoup some of that value and be able to actually have what you would hope is a little bit of hope for the future of the franchise. Instead of right now, I don't know, what are they pinning their hopes on? Trading for Donovan Mitchell? That's kind of where the Nets are at, is that they're putting it feels like they're putting all their eggs in the Donovan Mitchell basket and hoping that they can maybe initiate some kind of a trade with the Cavaliers to bring Donovan Mitchell to the Nets. But what is Brooklyn going to do with Donovan Mitchell? The Cavs are a much better constructed team right now with Donovan Mitchell than the Nets would be. And I don't even know what the trade would have to look like to pry Donovan Mitchell away from Cleveland. Obviously, it would likely include some of the Suns picks. I don't know if Mikal Bridges would have to be the piece going back to Cleveland. Maybe it's a couple. Again, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And if that is their big play, if that's their saving grace move, is hey, we're gonna trade for Donovan Mitchell, we're gonna sign him to an extension, or he's gonna re-up next summer when he's an unrestricted free agent, and then that's gonna be our ticket back to relevancy. Then man, good luck, Brooklyn, because that does not sound like a recipe for success. Now, as it stands from the Rockets' perspective, what would you be willing to give up to Brooklyn to be able to get a Mikal Bridges type? Or here, and this is I think the more interesting option if you're the Rockets, is if the Nets are hell-bent on chasing a Donovan Mitchell type, right? Fine, let them do it. The Rockets could get involved as a third-team facilitator and potentially get in there and try to grease the wheels by sending some of the Nets picks back to Brooklyn. Brooklyn gets whatever piece they want, and then maybe the Rockets are able to walk away with a couple pieces that fit what they need right now, add some shooting, add some defense, what have you, or quite possibly maybe even walk away with one or two of those Phoenix Suns picks, because those Suns picks are essentially what the Brooklyn picks were a few years ago when the Rockets originally got their hands on all those years worth of Brooklyn draft picks. So we don't know what those Suns picks are going to turn into, but they are probably some of the most prized assets in the NBA landscape right now. That's all the Nets have to hang their hat on is they've got the Suns picks to work with and Mikal Bridges, who is a relatively attractive trade target. What are they willing to do with those? What are they willing to part ways with? And how stubborn will Sean Marks and Joe Tsai ultimately be when it comes to the direction of the franchise? Because again, everything that, all the reporting and everything that the Nets did this season suggests that they're going to continue to be on the treadmill of mediocrity for years to come. Hopefully they can come around to seeing reason. And if they do, then what better trade partner than the Rockets to be able to get your hands on your picks and be able to send out Mikal Bridges, send out, a player or two. In fact, actually, let me double check something because unless I'm not mistaken, even the Rockets could re-engage the Nets on a deal structured around Dorian Finney-Smith or Cam Johnson as possibilities as well, right? It doesn't have to be Mikal Bridges, but it could be something as simple as, hey, Brooklyn, we'll give you guys some of your picks back or all of your picks back. Give us serviceable player X. So, again, take your pick, Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, Dorian Finney-Smith, whatever. Give us serviceable player X. And then we'll give you, one of the Suns picks, two of the Suns picks, maybe. I think that is at least a trade that has some legs where maybe the Nets use a little bit of the Suns draft capital to cash in to get their own picks back. The Rockets scoop up another serviceable, player that can be injected in the rotation or kind of a depth addition, whatever. And then Brooklyn gets the best of both worlds where they're still holding on to a little bit of the Suns capital, probably maybe the ones that are a little bit further out. And then the Rockets are able to walk away with one or two pieces of the Suns' future to kind of diversify their assets a little bit. Because again, right now, all the assets the Rockets have are the Nets' assets in addition to their own draft capital. And the Nets have zero incentive to be bad. So those picks, especially if the Nets somehow land Donovan Mitchell, that's going to be problematic. Because if the Nets somehow get Donovan Mitchell and they somehow don't give up Mikal Bridges, then you're looking at a situation where, for Cleveland, maybe it's as simple as just the Nets are able to throw Ben Simmons into a deal. Ben Simmons has an expiring contract this year. Maybe it's Ben Simmons and, Ben Simmons and Cam Thomas for and a bunch of the Suns picks or all the Suns picks for Donovan Mitchell. Maybe that's a trade that Brooklyn's willing to swing. Then suddenly that's a Brooklyn team that's probably looking at being top 6, flirting top 6 in the Eastern Conference. And suddenly those picks that the Rockets have lose a lot of their value. And that's the concern here is if Brooklyn actually is able to swing a big trade, a franchise altering trade, and get back to a place where they're playing above 500 basketball, then the Rockets lose all the value that those picks should have conveyed if the team continued to be in disarray or turmoil or mediocrity or whatever. So I do feel like the Rockets need to do their due diligence and find a way to capitalize on those picks. It could be with the Brooklyn Nets. That's the one that makes the most sense because they have those picks have the most value to Brooklyn than to any other team in the association. But it doesn't have to be Brooklyn. It could be any number of other teams in the NBA that have players that could potentially be on the trade market, right? Borderline all-stars that are looking for a new home, right? Brandon Ingram with the New Orleans Pelicans, Lauri Markkanen with the Utah Jazz. Maybe, and I'm not a big fan. I like Lauri Markkanen quite a bit. I feel like the asking price would be way too high with Danny Ainge, but not a big Brandon Ingram fan. Point is, it feels like there could be a lot of movement this offseason in the NBA landscape, and the Rockets, as ever and as always, will be active in trade talks ahead of the NBA draft. And they've got this year's draft pick as well as up to 4 other additional future firsts via the Nets and their own draft picks that they could trade to try and land a star player if one who fits the bill becomes available this offseason. Coming up, I want to get into our final thing here on today's show, which is the Rockets who made the cut for the NBA's top 25 under 25 list via The Ringer. We're going to get there in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets. All right, let's get into the Rockets' top top 25 under 25 lists. So every so often, different outlets will publish these lists, and you know, top 25 under 25 is a recurring theme, right? So who are the best players in the NBA under the age of 25? And there were, I was a little bit surprised, in all honesty, of the names of the Rockets that actually made the cut on this list this time around. So let's start at the top. The first name for the Houston Rockets that made the cut was Jabari Smith Jr., right on the edge of making the entrance. He clocks in at number 25 on the top 25 list. And for each one of these players, there was a reason for hope and a reason for doubt. So if you didn't read the article, I'm going to give the excerpts here really quickly. So for Jabari Smith Jr., reason for hope. Picture Aaron Gordon, except give him Jaden McDaniels' arms and a silky jump shot. That's the promise of Smith, who combines two of the most valuable commodities in today's game, length and shooting. The 21-year-old forward can be a menace across the defensive spectrum, on the ball and off it. And his shooting ability, 36% from three and 81% from the free throw line this past season, suggests untapped offensive potential. Even if Smith doesn't become a superstar, it's easy to imagine him as a game-breaking role player on a championship team. That gets the people going too. Fully agree there, right? Even if Jabari isn't ever a true blue superstar, which, an aside here, I still think he has the skill set to become a superstar. Because again, he's got an unguardable jump shot. And, you know, if he cleans up the handle just a little bit more, he might not ever be your primary play initiator or a guy that you give the rock to and say, go get us a bucket. But if you put him in the right spots on the floor, I think he can still be incredibly effective and be a really important offensive option for this team. Now, reason for doubt. It's not a great sign when a top 3 pick begins winnowing his role in just his second season, as Smith did on the up-and-coming Rockets. Smith's ultimate destiny, especially on a team with so many young mouths to feed, may be as a streamlined offensive finisher and strong defender. There's no shame in that, but the offense is still somewhat theoretical, and many metrics suggest Smith isn't even very impactful on the other end. So I do think that eye test says that Jabari got a lot better as a defender this year. There's still a lot of room for him to grow. But those are the two blurbs on Jabari Smith Jr., number 25. I think that's relatively fair given his really rough rookie season and then how much of a jump he took this past year. I think we're in store for another big jump from Jabari Smith Jr. this next year. Again, there was a reason. There was a lot of hype surrounding him going into his draft class, why he was projected number 1 overall, the physicals, the measurables, everything that he brings to the table. There's still, I think, a lot of untapped potential there. All right, next on the list for the Houston Rockets, we have number 22, Jalen Green. Reason for hope. Jalen Green has always had the ingredients for stardom: twitch, unpredictability, electrifying movement patterns, elite confidence, and hints of 3-level scoring ability. Absolutely true. After a tumultuous, inconsistent first 4 months of the season, Green finally put it all together in the final 17 games, putting up 24.6 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 4.2 assists on 38% shooting from beyond the three-point line. We've talked about this. We know about this. Jalen Green had an absurd month of March. He had an absurd close to the season. That the talent has never been the question with Jalen Green. The question has always been the consistency. Can he be this player all the time? Again, Jalen doesn't even have to be the player that he was in March, because the player that he was in March was arguably one of the best players on the planet for about a month straight. He doesn't have to be that. He just can't be one of the worst guards in the NBA, which is what he was for the first 4 months of the season. So striking a balance between those 2 points is how Jalen continues to grow and build his career and cement himself as a fixture with the Rockets organization for years to come. Now, reason for doubt. Green's rise came in the absence of Alperen Sengun, whose absence gave Green a bigger runway to attack the rim. You hope that Green's improved decision-making, defense effort, and three-point accuracy will hold when the two are reintegrated next season, but the greatest determinant of whether Green will hit his offensive ceiling may be Sengun's progress as a floor spacer. I fully disagree with this blurb from The Ringer. And this is one of the reasons that I wanted to tackle this, because I think that this is super lazy analysis. Yes, fine. Sengun can't shoot. Doesn't space the 4 from 3. That is not why those two didn't work for the first however many months of the season that Jalen Green struggled. Yes, obviously, playing with 5-out spacing opens things up a little bit more and opens up some driving lanes, but couple points here. One, the Rockets were already playing at a much faster pace before Alperen Sengun went down due to injury. They were playing at a much faster pace post All-Star break. That was a point of emphasis from Ime Udoka, was trying to get out in transition and open up opportunities for Jalen Green, Amin Thompson, Cam Whitmore to attack, to use their athleticism and their speed and their explosiveness in transition. So there's that. Two, Alperen Sengun makes life easier for everybody else on the floor. That's just a fact. You put the ball in Alpe's hands, he commands a double or sometimes a triple team, and then his teammates get to attack off the catch. They get to attack a broken, scattered defense. That, on paper, should work out incredibly well in Jalen Green's favor, right? How many times in the first few months of the season while Jalen was struggling did we see opportunities where Jalen was able to attack off a closeout, or where Sengun commanded a double team and generated a wide open catch and shoot shot for Jalen Green, but because his shooting numbers were wildly inconsistent and he was really struggling, especially on the road, to put things together, we saw, these really consistent bad shooting performances where it really felt like he wasn't making an impact or making the most of the opportunities given to him. And lastly, here's my final point. To start the season, Ime Udoka deployed Jalen Green in a variety of ways, but for the first chunk of the season, Jalen's role was to run the second unit. That second unit had 5-out spacing. That second unit was basically supposed to be the Jalen Green show, where it was Jalen Green plus 4 shooters, and it was supposed to be Jalen Green attacking, getting downhill, and basically bending the defense to his will, and either him scoring himself or getting to the free throw line, or commanding a double team and kicking it out for an open shot or getting the defense in rotation. And we saw what that looked like, and it looked really bad because Jalen just didn't have it at the beginning of the year, right? He had a really rough start to the season. So, and I'm sure I could come up with a few more examples as to why this is a complete BS reason for doubt on Jalen Green. Jalen and Sengun can absolutely work together. And in fact, I believe they can thrive together. Their skill sets are so complementary of one another. I will say, with one caveat, that yes, if Sengun does develop a more consistent outside shot, it will not only open things up for it'll open things up for everybody. It opens things up for himself. It opens things up for Jalen. Sure. Is that the reason that things might not work between those two? Absolutely not. Sengun doesn't need a 3-point shot for that duo to work. Case in point, go look at Domantas Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox. Push shooters around those two, it'll work. All right. Last Rocket here. Clocking in at number 12 on the list, Alperen Sengun. Reason for hope. Sengun's third season saw him be a finalist for Most Improved Player, with major strides taken on both ends in a competitive, winning environment. He won't ever be as good as Nikola Jokic, but does a better job mimicking the world's best player than anyone else, with more athleticism and organizational support than the 3-time MVP had in his early 20s. I think a sweeping definitive statement like he won't ever be as good as Nikola Jokic is dangerous. Now, that's probably true. Jokic is a 3-time MVP. He's already won a championship. Will Sengun ever be as good as Jokic? Who knows? Can he come close? Maybe. We don't know what Sengun's ceiling is. That's the exciting part, is we saw him take a massive step forward this past year. We still don't know how many more steps forward he can take. We don't know what his true ceiling is. Sengun might be good enough to be a top 15, top 10 player in the league one day. We'll see. Now, reason for doubt. It's fair to be concerned about a young big's lacking 3-point shot until he makes it respectable, but Sengun is so good in too many other areas for it to really matter. The greater issue in a playoff context is his defense. Can the Rockets ever survive 4 rounds with Sengun as their anchor, or will the front office have to add a real rim protector? Again, I'm a little against this reason for doubt, because the Rockets were able to anchor a top 10 defense with Alperen Sengun. In fact, their defense got worse when Alperen Sengun went down due to injury. So I think the concerns about Sengun's defense are largely overblown at this point in his career. I think I think he deserves the benefit of the doubt at this point, that he can be at least a net neutral, if not at times a positive defender as a 5-man in today's NBA. There's one area that I do need to see him continue to get better in, and that is his rebounding. There's definitely some games where you need to feel his presence on the boards a little bit more, but the Rockets are also able to hedge that with bigs like a Steven Adams, and they can also play in a variety of different ways with Jabari or Jeff Green at the 5 spot instead. So they have options there if there's ever a matchup that is just, super unfavorable when it comes to Sengun, or if it's just an awful matchup for him, then they have counters on counters on counters that they can go to with their other players. But at no point is Sengun like a defensive liability to really be, oh my God, he's going to get played off the floor in the playoffs. Hell no. He just helped anchor a top 10 defense. Now, is it a guarantee that the Rockets are going to be a top 10 defense again next year? No. Do they have all the makings to be yet again an elite defensive team while also taking significant strides forward as an offensive team? Absolutely. So I don't really agree with the reason for doubt there on Sengun. I will say, though, some of the other names on this list, let's get into some of the names at the top. I thought it was the list itself was a little clunky when it started getting to the top. They've got Wemby listed at number 1. Anthony Edwards listed at number 2. SGA at number 3. And they've got Luka at number 4. I don't know how you can have Luka Doncic at number 4 in this list. The other 3 players ahead of him, the only one that I think you can make an argument that could be ahead of Luka on this list is SGA. Maybe. Ant hasn't earned it yet. Maybe a little bit of recency bias with how good he was against the Suns, as well as his series against the Nuggets. I think there's some recency bias going on with this article. And yes, Wemby projects to be this insane all-time presence, talent, whatever, and he had a hell of a rookie year. But I don't know if you can comfortably put Wemby at number 1 yet. Luka probably deserved that number 1 spot. So even though I do not like defending a Dallas Maverick, I'm just trying to be fair here. Halliburton at 5, Tyrese Maxey at 6, Chet Holmgren at 7, Jalen Williams at 8, Paolo Banchero at 9. I'm just reading off all the ones ahead of Alperen Sengun. Zion and Ja Morant both tied for 10th place. And then Alperen Sengun at 12. I feel like this is kind of a fair list. Jalen Williams at 8 is a hell of a reach. That is kind of crazy. I don't know about that one. I know Jalen Williams has played some incredible basketball for the Thunder. I don't know if look, on his Ringer Top 100 ranking, he was ranked at 37th. So I think the Ringer is definitely drinking some of the OKC Kool-Aid over there. And Chet Holmgren at 7. Probably fair given his impact his rookie season. I don't know. Give me your thoughts. I'm curious what you think about the Ringer's top 25, under 25 list. How do you feel about the Rockets potentially trying to re-engage the Brooklyn Nets? What would you want a trade to look like? Would you be interested in Mikal Bridges or possibly one of the other names, Cam Johnson or Dorian Finney-Smith, as possible additions to this Rockets team? Let me know in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.